Right now, police have arrested more than 100 undocumented migrants packed in a house in Primrose, west of Johannesburg. They found 98 Ethiopians and 4 Malawians after tip-off. Now, the Home Affairs Minister Aaron Motsoaledi says some are as young as 10 and need medical attention for malnutrition and dehydration. He also says that some of the migrants are probably victims of a people smuggling syndicate with cheap labor. Now, the owner of the house is amongst those arrested. So to take this discussion further, we're going to be joined by Patience Zhou, Project Manager at Save the Children South Africa. Patience, good afternoon, and thank you for your time with us here on the SABC.
Thank you, Lizelle, for having me.
With this issue coming to the fore, the issue of undocumented migrants is a big problem for South Africa. And so at this point, perhaps you could talk to us about the right approach to address this problem, especially where children are concerned.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the case at hand, I think it is important for us, in order to respond effectively, to differentiate between the aspect of undocumentation as well as the issue of human trafficking that is being sustained. So in order for us to respond effectively, then we need to take an interdepartmental approach.
Patience, let me interrupt you there. Perhaps you could answer the question and listen to my voice. I'll prompt you if there's anything that I need to follow up on the back of what you echo. Perhaps you could speak to the right approach at this point to address the issue, especially when we see children involved in the matter.
So there's need for us to take an interdepartmental approach where we are going to look at the involvement of the various key departments. In this case, the Department of Social Development is very important as the custodian of all children in South Africa. They need to be at the forefront in terms of responding to the needs of the children that were identified in this case.
No, absolutely, because we're obviously looking at the minister now who indicated that they suspect a human trafficking syndicate, given the state that some of the people were found in. And I wonder at this point, in your opinion, whether South Africa and its laws are responding effectively in human trafficking cases, as most happen to include children and the vulnerable.
So I think there's room to do more when it comes to issues of human trafficking and responding to it effectively where children are concerned, because I think we lack data, the numbers of how many cases of trafficking, and the moment we attach human trafficking and undocumented and the undocumentation of migrants, then we miss the issue of human trafficking. Yes, they might be related, but when we are dealing now with cases of human trafficking, in this case, would we expect a 10-year-old to be able to know that they need a passport to come into South Africa? So we are now placing the blame on the victims. In this case, when they are children, I think we can do more in terms of managing the case, in terms of responding to their needs. So we need at all times, when you're talking about trafficking, let us not also talk about the aspect of undocumentation, because definitely, because trafficked people, they are victims. They might be coerced to come into the country, and they might be promised, and they might be been moved in ways that would make them to be vulnerable. And when we are looking at children, an adult who is responsible for their documentation should be the one that we should be looking for to ensure that children have traveled and migrated safely. So there is more that we can do in terms of strengthening our policy, in terms of identification, and also working as a collaborative, coordinated responses where the rights of children are at stake.
Well, I mean, those are important distinctions. And yes, it is about perhaps strengthening policy and looking at the different collaborations. So I actually want to bring in the role of social development in cases like this and look at where, these children are undocumented. They also, when they're found in a foreign country, what should be the department's role? And perhaps in conclusion, I could also just get your opinion on the tragedy that occurred in Johannesburg, the inferno in Johannesburg on Thursday. Many lives were lost, mothers, fathers, families wiped out. And I also wonder, given that some of the victims were undocumented. How should government be assisting what transpired there in dealing with kids and all those who've lost parents and their valuables?
Okay. So in terms of how the Department of Social Development should be involved, the Department of Social Development have got guidelines for the management of cases of migrant children that are found in the country. And these guidelines, they actually even refer to the aspect of an interdepartmental standard operating procedures that have been harmonized to include even standard operating procedures of government departments such as the Department of Home Affairs, as well as standard operating procedures for the Department of Health as well, how the three departments should be responsible and working hand in hand in terms of responding to this case that we have at hand, and where we see that even some of the children, they might be suffering dehydration, they have been cooped in a room for a number of days. So the Department of Social Development's responsibility is to assess and ensure that indeed we are dealing with children, and they work hand in hand with the Department of Health in terms of now of age estimation, and they also work hand in hand with the Department of Home Affairs to establish now the documentation processes that these children should have been put. But we also see even the need and the importance of involving consulates and embassies where the children are identified positively that they are coming from a certain country. There is need to involve the consulates and the embassies so that if there are processes that need to be put in place in terms of repatriation or reunification of these children, those countries, the consulate as the responsible countries and states for their citizens, then they will be able to respond. Now, moving to the aspect of the tragedy that you have seen in Johannesburg of a burnt building, it's quite sad because it's the second kind of incident where we are seeing children being burnt inside a house where they are expected to be safe. So in this case, again, we see now again issues of undocumentation of migrants. These are fathers, these are mothers that have migrated with children and they find themselves in South Africa. Again, the responsibility is on an
Patience,
adult.
I'm going to have to interject there.
Processes.
Patience, I'm going to have to interject them. Thank you for your time with us on the SABC, for those sentiments on that pertinent matter. Patience, our project manager at Save the Children South Africa. Obviously, now police having arrested more than 100 undocumented migrants. We're looking at how to adequately salvage that situation and the response that's needed. Again, thanks to Patience for her time.